today I'll be showing you how to set valve lash on a bucket and shim style system. So let me give you a little update. It's been 2 weeks since my last video, I believe, that was showing you all the new Firebird, and there wasn't much of an update on the Genesis, but the parts from Hyundai did come in. I dropped them off at my machine shop, and he was going to start building on it, so I'm waiting on him. Not sure if I covered this, but he was able to get the stripped flywheel bolts out and the one cylinder head bolt, obviously, because I got the head sitting right here. So that along with boring the block, cleaning it, honing it, costed me about $500. And then I asked him how much to build the short block. He said another $400. So I went ahead and did that just for the peace of mind of knowing it's done correctly, as I've never built a 4-cylinder before. But anyways, back to this. This applies to anything with a bucket style lifter. But today I'm going to be going over the specs of the Genesis Coupe 2.0. So first thing you're going to want to do is, I lined up the timing marks on camshaft sprockets, which would put cylinder 1 at the top dead center of the compression stroke. So as you can see, both of the lobes are facing up, which would mean the valves would be closed. So on the Genesis, what you're going to need for this is a feeler gauge set, by the way, or plastic gauge, but this works just as fine. So the specs on the intake side are 0.1 millimeter to 0.3 millimeters. Okay, so I'm gonna get those out. And then on the exhaust side, it should be within 0.2 millimeters to 0.4 millimeters. Okay, so what you're going to want to do, make sure the valves will be in the closed position, and then technically, if you wanted to, you could go through all these and find out what the exact gap is in between the lobe and the lifter, but technically also you just need to be within spec, unless for some reason you put in a new cam or valve springs or whatever and they called for something different. So just to make sure I'm within OEM spec, I'm going with the smallest on the intake, 0.1 millimeter. Alright, intake, it slides freely. If it didn't slide freely, that would mean that you possibly wouldn't be closing up your valves and seating them all the way. Now I'm going to go to the biggest, 0.3 millimeter, and it will not slide into either, between the lobe and the lifter, or the bucket, whatever you want to call it. So then you're going to move to the exhaust side. 0.2 slides freely. Well, that's within spec. Now 0.4 does not slide freely. So cylinder 1 is within spec. Obviously, if 0.2 was getting stuck, like I just said, you would have a seat problem. And 0.4, I'm not really sure what what could be damaged by that, but obviously something could, or they wouldn't, you know. Anyways, so then on the front of the Genesis, it's a 14 millimeter on the front sprocket. You could turn it with the socket, but I left mine in the garage, So I just got a rag on the sprocket and turning it by hand to the next cylinder. Do that with both sides. Get your feeler gauges. 0.1 millimeter. Slides freely, 0.3, stops. Exhaust, 0.2, slides freely, 0.4, stops, and stops. Okay. And just repeat this process however many times for however many cylinders you have. By the way, I have just some old PlayStation game cases sitting on each side of the head to keep the valves from hitting on the table. But then just repeat the process. 0.1, 0.3. I'm doing the wrong lobes. 0.1, 0.3, 0.2, 0.4, and then one more time. 0.1, slides freely. 0.3, does not. 0.2, slides freely. 0.4, does not. Now, what you would do if you are out of spec, see, the Genesis coupe uses a bucket lifter, and the way they do it is camera quit for some reason. Well, my phone quit. Anyways, what was that? Where did I leave off? Oh, the Genesis uses a bucket lifter, and the way they set valve lash on the Genesis is the actual buckets are different thicknesses, so you can adjust the valve lash accordingly. From what I've heard, most cars that use a bucket lifter have shims under the buckets, which is cheaper to adjust than buying a whole bucket. But anyways, I guess I can show y'all what you would do if you were out of spec. So let's go ahead and say cylinder 2 exhaust on the front valve was out of spec. What we would do, take our cam off. I'll probably stop this video, but take your cam off, and then you would pull your bucket off and look at the size under it and buy a bigger or smaller valve bucket according to where you were out of spec. So let me stop this video. I need to get my 12mm anyways, and I'll pick this back up here in a minute. Take the camshaft caps off. Get your camshaft off. Be gentle with it. And sometimes they slide right out. Alright, so may be able to see in there, but it's got some markings in there, I believe. that says 5.285. So if you were out of spec, you would pull it out, find out what size it is currently, and then swap it out for a bigger or larger by however much you would need to be within spec. So not super complicated. You know what you're doing. It's just kind of hard to find information on how to do these type of things on these cars. Not many people. It's not as popular as some other motors per se. But anyways, thanks for watching. If you're building, I hope this helped you out. Please subscribe, and we'll see where this build ends up going. Thank you.